You're standing in a crowded room, and for some reason, you're looking for the exit. Not because you're bored, and not because you're socially anxious, though the world has likely given you those labels a dozen times. It's because you have this quiet, persistent feeling that you don't quite belong to the conversation happening around you. If you were born between 1995 and 2000, you're living in a psychological gray zone. You aren't quite a millennial, with their memories of corded phones and their optimistic hustle culture. But you aren't quite Gen Z either, with their native fluency in a world that is permanently online and unapologetically loud. You are the bridge. And being a bridge is a lonely way to live. Most people look at your birth year and try to pin a label on you. They call you entitled, or digitally obsessed, or sensitive. But they're missing the heartbeat of your experience. What they don't see is the specific kind of exhaustion that comes from being the last generation to remember the before times and the first to be swallowed by the after. Think back to your childhood. You remember a world that was still physical. You played outside until the streetlights came on, but you also had a dial-up modem screaming in the background. You saw the transition. You watched the world go from tangible to virtual in the span of a few short years. Psychology calls this contextual displacement. It's the feeling of having your roots in one world while your branches are forced to grow in another. And it creates a unique psychological blueprint that most people, including yourself, don't have the words for yet. Stay with me, because if you've ever moved through your life feeling like an old soul trapped in a digital cage, what we're about to uncover is the reason you feel so out of place. Here is what happens inside you. A part of your mind still craves the deep presence of the analog world. You remember when a moment was something you lived, not something you curated for an audience. But because you were young when the digital shift happened, your nervous system adapted to the dopamine loops of social media faster than the generations before you. This creates a permanent internal conflict. A part of you wants to throw your phone into the ocean and live a quiet, disconnected life. But another part of you feels a spike of panic if you aren't reachable. You are mourning a world you barely got to experience while trying to survive in a world that feels increasingly shallow. Psychologists call this digital dualism. You aren't addicted to technology, you are tethered to it by necessity, while your spirit remains hungry for the depth of the physical world. This is why you feel a strange, hollow grief on a Tuesday afternoon for no reason at all. You're missing a pace of life that the world has collectively decided to abandon. There's another layer to this. If you were born in this window, you hit your formative years, your most vulnerable years of identity building, exactly when the algorithm became the dominant architect of human social life. You didn't just go through puberty. You went through puberty while being compared to a global standard of beauty and success that was mathematically impossible to reach. For the millennials, the pressure was to have it all. For Gen Z, the pressure is to be a brand. But for you, the person in the middle, the pressure is simply to belong. But where do you belong? You're too cynical for the live, laugh, love sincerity of the early 2000s, but you're too sincere for the hyper-ironic, detached humor of today. You find yourself mimicking the trends, using the slang, and following the rules. But underneath it all, there is a quiet voice asking, is this actually me? Or am I just performing for a ghost in the machine? When you don't see yourself reflected in the culture, your brain does something protective. It creates a watcher persona. You become an observer of life rather than a participant. You stand on the edges of the party, watching everyone else perform, wondering how they make it look so easy. But here is the part that matters, the part that shifts everything. This feeling of not belonging nowhere isn't a sign that something broke inside you. It's a sign that something settled. By not fitting into a specific generational box, you have developed a profound psychological adaptation called cognitive flexibility. Because you've had to navigate two different worlds, you possess a depth of perspective that the pure generations don't have. You have the work ethic of the old world and the technical intuition of the new. You have the ability to crave deep, meaningful silence, but also the speed to handle a world that never stops moving. Your isolation is actually your independence.
You feel like you belong nowhere because you were never meant to stay in one place. You were meant to be the translators, the ones who remind the world that behind every screen is a human heart that still needs to be seen. The ones who can look at a digital storm and remember that the sun is still there, even if it's not trending. The world will tell you that you're lost, that you're the anxious generation. But maybe you're not anxious. Maybe you're just the only ones who are still paying attention. You don't need a viral trend to validate your existence. You don't need to fit into a birth year bracket to know that your life has weight. That feeling of not belonging is actually your soul's way of telling you that you are bigger than the labels people try to put on you. So if you feel like you're drifting between two eras, don't mistake the distance for emptiness. You're not missing out on life. You're experiencing it from a height that most people are too busy to climb to. You don't need to find where you belong. You just need to realize that the space you occupy, this quiet in-between space, is exactly where the most important growth happens. You are the witness of the change, and that is a powerful thing to be. Be kind to your in-between heart today.